I will take you to China now, but Calicut that we've heard a lot about in the last presentation will also still be an important part of the geography of what I'm going to talk to you about today. And I'm going to talk about Zheng and how the geography of his travels is represented in the late 16th and early 17th century. And I think most of you, if you work with world history, you will be familiar with Zheng. In the early 15th century, the Ming Emperor sent several missions from China into the Indian Ocean world, and they were led by the eunuch Zheng. And he and his fleet, they went from Nanjing in China to various places in Southeast Asia, including Java, Malacca, and also to Calicut, which for the first few voyages was actually the final destination. But on the last few of the 7 voyages, they even went to the east coast of Africa. And these voyages in the early 15th century, they inspired quite a few like geographic accounts. So with these voyages into the Indian Ocean world, so Zheng, he didn't really discover anything new. They traveled on well-established trade routes that have been traveled before. But after these voyages, there was a surge in geographic information on the Indian Ocean world. There were a few travel accounts, a few people traveled together on the fleet with Zheng and wrote ethnographies of these regions, which then inspired even further work to learn more about the places they visited, to learn more about Bengal, to learn more about Calicut and Mogadishu and other places. And if we think, if you have worked with Chinese map making before, and if you think Zheng and maps, you will think of this map, which we usually call the Zheng map in literature. It doesn't really have a title, this map, so because it's connected to the voyages of Zheng, usually we just call it the Zheng map. So this map, we don't have the 15th century examples. The earliest copy of it we have is in a book printed in 1621, and we have a few later copies of it as well. And at the beginning of this map in this 1621 military encyclopedia, there's a little note that says, oh, this map is connected to the voyages of Zheng. And what I'm showing you on the screen here in the upper half, on the upper part is basically the whole map. So it's a map in a book. It spans over multiple pages, and if you were to put them all together, you would end up with a huge strip like you see above. And it's basically a map that spans from the coast of China across the whole of the Indian Ocean, and it also shows you the east coast of Africa. And this map, it's not oriented to a specific orientation, so north isn't up or east isn't up or anything, but the orientation of the map changes depending on where at the coast you are. So basically, it takes the coastline of China and the Indian Ocean world and puts it into one single strip. And the detail I'm showing you here is one segment of it, where you're here at the center. This is Sri Lanka. Then here's the southern tip of India, and this is the east coast of Africa. So you will have to be able to read the place names to understand where in this map you are. And an important feature of this map, and one of the reasons this map has actually been studied quite a bit, are these sea routes that are annotated on the map. So there's little dots that signify sea routes, and some of them are annotated with information. And this kind of information is very closely related to seafaring knowledge. It tells you the compass bearing you have to use, the distance, the time needed to travel between places, and in some cases also the position of the stars to simply help you navigate. And basically, this map is extremely closely related to sailing knowledge, and it doesn't really tell us about the ethnography of the places that are shown on the map or anything on the people that's information we could find in other works related to other maps, but not here in the case of this Zheng map. But this is basically the way a scholar in the late 17th century, how they are reading the geography of Zheng, how they are interpreting where Zheng went, and they very much connect him, in the case of this map, with detailed seafaring knowledge. Now, Zheng also features in a novel. And this is where the real literature part of my presentation comes in. So in 1597, a certain Luo Maodong, of whom we don't know much else, wrote a novel titled Sambao Taijian Xiyangji, which means it's the record of the eunuch Sambao traveling on the Western Ocean. And the eunuch Sambao, that's a nickname of Zheng. So Zheng is in the title of this novel, and it's a novel about the voyages of Zheng, at least according to the title. The real hero of this novel actually isn't Zheng, but Zheng does play a part in it. And the story of this novel goes that a group of people want to fetch a seal in further west from China, and then the emperor sends them on a mission into the Western Ocean. And they have a lot of adventures. There's a lot of fighting. They encounter a lot of people. And when they encounter these people, there are a lot of ethnography is also mentioned. So usually the story goes they meet somebody from a different country in the Indian Ocean world. Then they ask this person, where are you from? Then this person says, oh, I'm from this or that country. And then they ask this person, what are the customs like of your country? And the vocabulary used for that and the information that we find is actually very similar to a lot of these ethnographies that were produced in connection to Zheng's voyages. So the author, Luo Maodong, he had access, and he actually used historical geographical works to construct his novel. But then by doing this, he also incorporated a lot of fiction, a lot of fighting, a lot of fantasy. And the sources he used actually aren't those closely related to Zheng's voyages, but more like closer to his time in the late 16th or 17th, in the late 16th century. So there's also some information in there that postdates Zheng's voyages by quite a bit, but it's a novel, so this doesn't matter at all. It's just a fun story, and all these countries, they're just an interesting backdrop. And so Chinese books and titles are always a little bit tricky because we can find different titles in a lot of places. On the cover page, there might be a different title than in the table of contents. And in this case, in this novel, we have one version that says that the title is that it's a newly carved, fully illustrated novel record of the eunuch Sambao traveling west. We don't have the first edition, so newly carved implies that it's a second edition at least. We don't know when exactly this was made, but definitely sometime between 1597 and before 1644, so it's still definitely a Ming print. But the book advertises as being fully illustrated. And if we look at this book, and it's a book in 100 chapters, and basically every chapter has a few illustrations that are actually pretty fun to look at. Most of them are scenes of people or of deities, of bodhisattvas, a lot of battle scenes, because really there's a lot of fighting going on in this novel. And there's a surprising amount of horses being shown in these pictures for a novel that actually plays aboard ships most of the time, and that has a lot of focus on the naval side of things, but there are horses for some reason in nearly every second image. But then we also, as down here, we do have some battle scenes on ship as well. But even though we have a lot of geography in the text of the novel and the geography of the places seems to be pretty important. In the illustrations, the geography doesn't really matter that much, except in two spaces we do have some hints at geography, and this is these two images, and basically we have here a gate, and the gate is labeled as the country of Java, and we have in the story we have a gate labeled as the city of the country of the women. So in this case, these countries, they get delegated to just be a city in the illustration. So the actual geography doesn't matter in the images, but the fact that it's a country, the country is just a city and it's displayed as such. But there's one scene in the novel where a map and cartography and the geography becomes even more important. At the very beginning of the story, one of the heroes, he goes to the emperor and discusses the voyage going further west. So this happens before they travel west. And then he's in a discussion with the emperor, and the emperor asked him, where do you want to go? Why do you want to go to the Western Ocean? What actually is the Western Ocean? And then the hero answers him that the Western Ocean isn't one country, but is actually a word that comprises a lot of countries, and the region of the Western Ocean has a lot of countries. And then he shows the emperor a map of these regions. The emperor looks at the map and says, oh, I understand what is going on. And then the hero continues to list 18 countries that the emperor could see on the map. And here's a list of these 18 countries that the hero mentions, and you will recognize some of them. So there's Calicut again on the list, but there's also countries like the Maldives, Mogadishu, Bengal, Hormuz, which are places Zheng actually traveled to. There's also a few countries that I highlighted in red. There's the country of the women, there's the country of the golden-eyed people, and there's the country of the demons. And these are fictional countries, obviously. And some of these are fictional only to the novel. So the author of the novel, Luo Dong, he invented them. We can't find any records of them elsewhere. But then the country of the women, for example, I think that's a trope we can find in a lot of literature around the world. Is something we already find in Chinese sources going back for centuries before Zheng voyages, that there is something like a country of the women. So we have here a mix of countries Zheng actually traveled to. We have countries made up by the author of the novel, and we have fictional countries that have a long tradition in Chinese literature. But these are not all the countries that Zheng and the heroes of the novel encounter in the novel. In total, there are actually 15 countries mentioned in there, and some of the other countries that Zheng and his friends encounter there have actually nothing to do with the real Zheng either. So they meet people from the Philippines, they meet people from Egypt, and from really all across the geographic knowledge we have in the Chinese, in the Chinese geography. But so the actual places don't really matter in the novel. They're just really like a backdrop. But let's go back to the map that the emperor saw. So he describes, he just says he has seen this map that the hero presented to him. And in 1597, when Luo Dong wrote this novel, there was already quite a large corpus of maps that the author could have seen and thought about when he wrote his novel. And most importantly, we have this atlas called Guangyu or Expanded Territorial Maps, which was first made in 1556 or 1557. And this is an atlas that has maps of all the provinces of the Ming Empire, but it also has a map of the Indian Ocean world, and which I'm showing you here. And on this map here, you can see the coastline. This is the coastline of China. This here is Africa. And if we zoom in, we can see a lot of little islands that are labeled with place names. And this is the way that Chinese maps tend to display maritime countries, countries that appear in the maritime world. They're just little dots, and then just the place names is inserted there, and then you have to read the text to understand what is actually meant by this map and what this map actually is trying to display. And it's very likely that this is also what the author of the novel had in mind when he wrote his story about the hero showing a map to the emperor. So probably a map that had all these little circles in a sea of wave with all these place names on there. This Guangyu, this atlas was extremely popular, and basically probably a lot of, if people have seen a map, they've probably seen some version of this map in the late 16th century. So in conclusion, when we today think of Zheng, we think of this Zheng map, this navigational map, this map that showed you the sea routes and the compass bearings and the information on how to sail from one place to another. But the geography in the novel is a bit more complex, and the geography in the novel also shows us how a popular understanding of geography, of what the author could take and present it to his audience. But the novel also shows us that geography and maps were something that played into the imagination of a late Ming audience. They were interested in these kinds of maps, and the geography and ethnography of all these people played an important part in this novel, and aiding to a readership an imagined but also partly real geography of the Indian Ocean world through the eyes of a fictional Zheng. Thank you.